After 4 years of solving everyone's emergencies and working countless weekends, my boss looked me in the eye and said I wasn't leadership material. 2 weeks later, when our biggest client threatened to walk, suddenly he couldn't function without me. Funny how that works. If you've ever been undervalued at work, hit that subscribe button and give this a like. I share workplace revenge stories that'll make your day better. Now, let's get into how I taught my boss the hard way what I was really worth. My name is Olivia Reyes, a senior marketing strategist at Phoenix Digital in downtown Chicago. Our office occupied the 27th floor of a glass tower with those Instagram-worthy views that cost us our work-life balance. For 4 years, I'd been the reliable engine behind our most successful campaigns, the problem solver everyone turned to when deadlines loomed or projects derailed. My boss, David, was the opposite of me in every way. Where I was methodical and detail-oriented, he was all charisma and connections. He excelled at client dinners and industry panels, but conveniently disappeared when actual work needed doing. Still, we made a good team. I made his promises happen. He made sure we got the clients. At least, that's what I thought. I'd been eyeing the director of strategy position since Janet announced her retirement 6 months ago. I'd already been handling half her responsibilities anyway, developing our analytics framework, mentoring junior strategists, and leading client presentations when David was double booked. I'd even created our new campaign methodology that had won us 3 industry awards last year. The morning of my performance review, I was confident. My metrics were stellar, client feedback glowing. I'd prepared a portfolio showing exactly how I'd grown our key accounts by 42% year over year. "Olivia, you know we value your contributions," David began, leaning back in his ergonomic chair. The floor-to-ceiling windows behind him framed Chicago's skyline like a movie backdrop. "Your attention to detail is unmatched." My stomach tightened. In corporate speak, excessive praise usually precedes bad news. "About the director position," he continued, "the executive team and I feel you're not quite ready for that level of leadership yet." I blinked, momentarily speechless. "Not ready? I've been running point on our top 3 accounts since January." David smiled that client-ready smile that never reached his eyes. "It's not about the work quality, Olivia. It's about executive presence. Leadership is about commanding attention, driving vision. You're more of a behind-the-scenes person, which is valuable, just not what we need in a director." "So who's getting the position?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "We're bringing in Marcus from Apex. He has the industry connections we need to expand our portfolio." Marcus, David's former fraternity brother who'd been posting golf photos with our CEO for months. The one with half my experience but twice my networking budget. "I see," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "And what's my path forward here?" "Keep doing what you're doing," David said brightly. "We're giving you a 3% raise, by the way, and in a year or 2, who knows?" 3%. Barely keeping pace with inflation, not even close to reflecting the 70-hour weeks I'd been putting in. I nodded mechanically as David continued outlining my stunted future at Phoenix. My thoughts drifted to the client crisis I'd solved just last week, canceling my best friend's birthday dinner to fix a campaign David had mismanaged. All that sacrifice, unacknowledged and unrewarded. Back at my desk, I stared at my screen, the familiar anger and disappointment churning inside me. My calendar showed 3 weekend strategy sessions I'd volunteered for, early morning calls I'd offered to cover, and training sessions I'd developed for new hires. All extra work, all beyond my job description, all things I did to prove my worth that had just been dismissed as insufficient. My inbox pinged with a message from David. "Need you to work up concepts for the Miller pitch this weekend. Marcus starts next month and I want to impress him with our pipeline. Thanks, you're the best." Something snapped inside me. 4 years of accumulated resentment crystallized into sudden clarity. They didn't see me as a leader. They saw me as the office workhorse, reliable, exploitable, and ultimately replaceable. Well, if I was so replaceable, perhaps it was time to see how the office functioned without my extra effort. The next morning, I arrived at the office precisely at 9 a.m., not my usual 7:30. Several urgent emails from our West Coast team sat unanswered in my inbox from the previous evening. Normally, I would have handled them before bed. Today, they could wait until business hours. David walked past my desk at 9:45, coffee in hand, and did a double take. "Everything okay? You're usually here before everyone else." "Just keeping to my contracted hours," I replied with a pleasant smile. "Work-life balance is important, right?" He laughed, assuming I was joking, and continued to his office. By noon, word about Marcus's hiring had spread through the office. Several colleagues stopped by my desk with sympathetic glances. "It should have been you," whispered Rachel, our graphic designer. "Everyone knows you're the one keeping our biggest clients happy." "Thanks," I said, appreciating the solidarity but hating the pity. The most uncomfortable moment came during our team meeting when David proudly announced Marcus's hiring. "He'll bring the dynamism and leadership presence we need to take Phoenix to the next level," David declared, as if the rest of us had been holding the company back. I felt 15 pairs of eyes flick toward me, then quickly away. The unspoken question hung in the air. If Olivia couldn't get promoted after everything she's done, what chance do any of us have? "Olivia will be instrumental in helping Marcus transition into his role," David added, as if throwing me a bone. "Her deep knowledge of our processes will be invaluable." Translation: I'd be training my new boss on how to do the job I should have gotten. That evening, I met my sister Mia at a wine bar several blocks from the office. She took one look at my face and ordered a bottle instead of glasses. "They're bringing in some guy from outside," I explained, the words bitter on my tongue. "Apparently, I lack executive presence and need to be more assertive." Mia, a software engineer who had faced her share of workplace sexism, didn't bother with platitudes. So the old, "she's competent but not confident" routine, would they have said that to a man with your track record? Probably not, I admitted, swirling my wine. But it's more complicated than just gender. I've played by their rules, staying late, taking on extra work, making David look good. I thought that would be enough. "That's the trap," Mia said. "They make you think if you just work hard enough you'll be recognized. But the game is rigged. The Davids of the world promote people like themselves." The truth of her words hit hard. I'd spent 4 years believing in a meritocracy that didn't exist. The following days were a strange exercise in restraint. I did my job, exactly my job, nothing more. No early mornings, no weekends, no rescue missions for other teams. I even took a lunch break away from my desk, something I hadn't done in years. The office began to feel the effects almost immediately. Client emails that I used to answer at all hours now waited until morning. Reports that I typically polished to perfection went out with the basics covered, but none of the extra analysis I used to provide. The weekend strategy session for the Miller pitch was rescheduled. When I explained I had personal plans, David's frustration grew visibly. "Olivia, the quarterly report for Westfield is looking pretty basic," he said one afternoon, hovering by my desk. "It covers all the required metrics," I replied calmly. "But you usually add those trend comparisons and competitive insights they love. Those require additional research beyond the scope of our standard reporting. With my current workload, I'm focusing on meeting our contracted deliverables." His frown deepened. "We need to maintain the level of service our clients expect." I completely agree. That's why I've documented all my processes, to ensure consistent quality across the team, I said, gesturing to the workflow guides I'd created over the years, guides that no one else had bothered to read. 2 weeks later, I hit my lowest point. Scrolling through LinkedIn, I saw David had posted a glowing welcome announcement for Marcus. "Thrilled to have such a visionary leader joining our team." The post had hundreds of likes, including several from our biggest clients. I closed my laptop and stared out my apartment window at the Chicago skyline. 4 years of my life given to a company that saw me as interchangeable. Was this really all there was? For the first time in years, I called in sick without actually being ill. I spent the day updating my resume and LinkedIn profile, finally acknowledging what I should have seen long ago. Phoenix Digital would never value me properly. Then my phone rang. Unknown number with a Seattle area code. "Is this Olivia Reyes?" a woman's voice asked when I answered. "Yes, speaking." "This is Vanessa Williams, VP of Client Strategy at Elevate Digital. We haven't met, but Janet Chen suggested I reach out to you directly." Janet Chen, my former mentor who had retired 6 months ago. "Janet mentioned you were the real strategic mind behind the Westfield campaign," Vanessa continued. "We're launching a similar initiative and could use someone with your expertise. Would you be open to a conversation?" I sat up straighter, something stirring inside me. "I'd be very interested in hearing more." After scheduling a video call for the following day, I opened my laptop again. But instead of returning to my resume, I pulled up a document I'd started after my conversation with David, my detailed list of all the extra work I'd been doing. Looking at it now, I realized it wasn't just a record of my contributions. It was evidence of how Phoenix had been exploiting my willingness to go above and beyond without compensation or recognition. That's when the spark ignited. I wouldn't just stop doing extra work. I would leverage my knowledge and connections to ensure that when I eventually left, they'd understand exactly what they had lost. I opened a new document and titled it Exit Strategy. This wouldn't be just about walking away. This would be about reclaiming my value. My interview with Elevate Digital was refreshingly different. Vanessa had actually studied our Westfield campaign and asked thoughtful questions about my strategy. "I'm impressed by how you balanced brand storytelling with conversion metrics," she said. "Most marketers excel at one or the other, not both." For the first time in months, I felt genuinely valued. We ended the call with plans for a formal interview and discussion of a compensation package that reflected my strategic leadership. Back at Phoenix, I implemented my exit strategy with methodical precision. First, I documented everything, not for the company's benefit, but for my own protection. Second, I compartmentalized my knowledge. For years, I'd been an open book, sharing insights, solving problems across teams, making myself indispensable. Now, I responded only to direct requests, provided exactly what was asked, nothing more, and stopped offering solutions in meetings. "Olivia, do you have thoughts on the Blakely proposal?" David asked during our team huddle, clearly expecting me to fill the awkward silence after his vague presentation. "I'd need more specific direction to provide useful input," I replied calmly. "But you usually have ideas ready to go," he pressed. "I'm focusing on my assigned accounts right now," I said. "If you'd like me to analyze Blakely specifically, I'd be happy to schedule time for it." The room fell silent. David had grown accustomed to me filling gaps in his planning. Now he was on his own. By week 3, cracks began appearing in Phoenix's operations. The Westfield quarterly review was approaching, normally when I'd work late preparing slides and anticipating client questions. This time, I prepared only my designated sections, leaving David and Marcus to handle the rest. The day before the review, David appeared at my desk, looking harried. "Where's the competitor analysis for Westfield?" he asked, coffee sloshing. "That wasn't assigned to me this quarter," I replied, pulling up the meeting notes. "Marcus was meant to handle that section." David's face tightened. "He's still getting up to speed. Can you put something together? You know how Rebecca from Westfield always asks about competitor movements. I'd be happy to," I said pleasantly, "though it would take about 4 hours, which means I'd need to deprioritize the Miller campaign due tomorrow. Which would you prefer I focus on?" It was a perfect trap. Either the Westfield meeting would go poorly or the Miller deadline would be missed. "Just do what you can with Westfield. I'll speak to the Miller team about an extension," he muttered. I spent exactly my contracted hours preparing a basic analysis, professional but lacking my usual depth and insights. No late night, no miracle save. The next day, I joined the Westfield call with professional detachment. Rebecca indeed asked her usual penetrating questions about competitor strategy, which David and Marcus struggled to answer. This isn't the level of analysis we're accustomed to from your team, Rebecca noted coolly. Is everything all right at Phoenix? The situation escalated when Westfield requested an emergency meeting with senior leadership, expressing concerns about recent declines in campaign performance. The same day, I received a formal offer from Elevate Digital for a director position with a 35% salary increase. During the emergency strategy meeting, our CEO, Patricia, joined unexpectedly. "I want to understand what's happening with Westfield before I join this call," she said. "They're threatening to review our contract." David launched into a convoluted explanation about transition periods and evolving strategies, while Marcus looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Olivia," Patricia turned to me directly, "you've managed this account for years. What's your assessment?" "Westfield values consistency and deep industry knowledge," I said carefully. "They've expressed concern about the recent changes in account leadership and reporting depth. This is the first I'm hearing about these specific concerns," Patricia said, her gaze sharpening. "I've documented them in our client management system," I replied, pulling up my detailed notes, "and forwarded them to David and Marcus after each client call." The room went silent as executives exchanged glances. "Westfield represents 25% of our annual revenue. Their contract renewal is due in 8 weeks. Patricia's expression hardened as she turned to David. "We need to fix this immediately. What's the plan?" Before David could respond, I spoke up. "I should mention that I've prepared a transition document for my accounts. I've accepted a director position at another agency and will be giving my formal notice today." The stunned silence that followed was worth 4 years of overlooked contributions. Those final 2 weeks at Phoenix? Pure theater. Suddenly, everyone wanted a piece of my time, the same people who'd walked past my desk for years without acknowledgement. David's mood swings were almost comical, veering between "we're family here" speeches and muttered comments about unprofessional departures. Poor Marcus looked like he was drowning, especially after another tense call with Westfield that I pretended not to overhear. I kept it professional, though. No gloating, no burned bridges, just crisp documentation, cordial meetings, and the quiet satisfaction of watching them realize exactly what they were losing. 3 days before my departure, Patricia called me into her office. "I've reviewed your client documentation and transition notes," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "Very thorough. I wish we'd had this conversation sooner." She slid a counteroffer across her desk: Director of Strategy, 40% salary increase, and leadership of the Westfield account team. "We can't afford to lose you," she admitted frankly, "especially not to a competitor." I thanked her sincerely but declined. The Elevate opportunity offered something Phoenix couldn't match, a fresh start where I wouldn't be fighting years of established perceptions. On my last day, David approached my desk, his usual confidence notably absent. "You don't have to leave," he said quietly. "We can work something out." I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized how small he suddenly appeared. Without me propping him up, he was just a man with a good haircut and an impressive vocabulary. "I've been trying to work something out for 4 years, David. You just never noticed."